We've got a fantastic panel today. Can't wait for this. And we've had a little pre-chat and obviously listened to the previous panel, which was also great and leads really nicely into what we're going to talk about on the topic of measurement. So we are working through an immense period of change at the moment. It's a world that is dominated by increasing complexity. Consumers are moving across channels and platforms like never before. So it's really, really important that the industry delivers real outcomes and meaningful measurements. So today we're going to be tackling those considerations that brands need to make when it comes to measurements, from impressions, deterministic data, attention and more. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is get the panellists to introduce themselves.
Brilliant. Hi, I'm Wendy Moores. I'm the Head of Marketing at Direct Line.
I'm Graham Swallow. I'm Head of Data, Product and Tech at Little Dot Studios.
I'm Martin Bentley, Country Manager for Audience Project.
Great. So what I'd like to do first is actually kick off with Wendy, who's going to give us a brief overview of the landscape over the past 12 months and what we need to know about the changes that have taken place.
Brilliant, thank you. I guess from an advertiser's perspective, what we've seen over the last 12 months is lots of talk about what's coming. So things like C-Flight and Origin and the ability to do greater cross-media, have greater transparency in cross-media measurement. But obviously, we're not actually seeing that data yet, so we're unable to use it. I think really interesting listening to the last panel and totally resonated with what you guys were saying about the number of different models that we've all got to measure our activity, and the fact that whilst they are brilliant for different channels, sometimes they tell a different story. It makes it really hard to have that coherent narrative. So I think probably for me, the thing that's changing the most is that need to really embrace attribution modelling within our industry and start to think better about how we can really delve down into the different parts of the plan and kind of stop attributing everything to one channel and start bringing out that contribution through the funnel of all of our different activities that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to that because I think there's some initiatives that have been begun, if you like, and there's been good movement on them, but the marketers haven't got the data yet. But there's also, I mean, I think it was yesterday the PwC IAB numbers came out for spend, and video spend's gone up 58% in 1 year over the pandemic. So, and that we would, as a measurement company, say that most of that is still not transparently being measured in terms of who's being reached and at what sort of net amount of reach is happening across, say, Facebook, YouTube, and so on. It's just not known, even though more and more money is going there. So that's probably one of the biggest trends. And then actually with the other news that's coming out at the moment around sort of the shifts in the TV or digital TV landscape, where you can have probably ads on Netflix. I mean, what's a marketer to do with that? I mean, you need to understand what's there, don't you? You've got to measure it.
And I think also different the different consumption habits of consumers now. Like when it comes to particularly TV viewing, those appointments of view spots are going to become ever more important for us as advertisers, because actually we're quite often doing something else. And if you're binge watching a series on Netflix, you can advertise in between that all you want, but whether or not you're actually getting any effective attention from those consumers is going to become a big problem. So you might see that you're getting huge reach, but whether or not it's attentive reach, I think is something that's really interesting. And probably the other thing I would just add is that the kind of the speed of delivery of those metrics is really important as well. As the previous panel pointed out, there is an enormous lag between something like an econometric model versus something that's sort of more immediate and digital, and that doesn't help with the confusion in the storytelling around what's working and what isn't working.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think, to be blunt, nothing's happened in the last 12 months to change the measurement landscape. It's just the same as it was 12 months ago. We talked about a lot of things, and there are things around the corner, like there are always things around the corner. But we're still just kind of waiting to see, what's the outcome of Project Origin, how much are the other platforms going to get on board, and how much are the Googles and Facebooks of this world going to start sharing more about what's happening on their platforms.
Okay, so what, in your opinion, is the best way that advertisers can plan, optimise, measure and forecast their campaigns?
I think really to kind of get it right, we need a bit of a change in mindset in our planning approach, which is going to be really tough because for years we've planned in a very linear way, and actually certainly the sort of things that we're looking at is how can we plan in a much more AV neutral way so that we're finding different ways to reach consumers and not relying, in the past we'd have said that the majority of our reach was coming through our TV plan, and then we're trying to get incrementality on top of that. Actually, I think we probably need to flip that on its head and start thinking, there's so much inflation in the TV market that actually makes it very, very ineffective now. So we're running to stand still in terms of whether or not the plan that worked yesterday will work tomorrow. So I think that's the mindset shift that's needed. But that's going to be really tough, not only for advertisers themselves. I think it's going to take some quite brave advertisers to do things very differently because it's uncharted territory. But equally for our agencies, who for years have been remunerated in a particular way based on how they plan our campaigns, it's counterintuitive to then start saying, actually, do you know what? Don't give me that really effective reach plan. What I want is some big spots over here that are going to cost more, but actually are going to do a different job. And then selling that through internally. If I think about when I go in to speak to my finance director, they want to know that what I'm doing is delivering return on investment now as well as in the future. And going in with an argument of, we want to try something different, I'm not sure it's going to work, or I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to tell you it's going to work, but instinctively it feels like the right thing, is a huge conundrum for us. So I think there's a collaboration piece there that the more that agencies, clients, different providers, the broadcasters themselves can work together to get that transparency and work out what that measurement roadmap looks like, that's absolutely critical.
One of the things you said to me as well was you are, envious is the wrong word, but new brands that are starting now with no heritage and no history, it's quite an interesting point where they are as opposed to a more heritage brand like yours.
Definitely, and we were talking about this before, Graham, weren't we? In that you've got all these new digital first brands who I am quite envious of them because they haven't spent 40 years spending multi-million pounds on TV. Actually, they're seeing results immediately from very different channels than we will. It's hard to unpick this. When you shout on TV, it's hard to unpick anything else and for the rest of the plan to have a voice, and that's why I'm really keen to explore how we can get much better attribution modelling, because I don't believe that some of the activity we're doing over here isn't delivering. We were just talking before, weren't we? Is it the 60-second TV spot or the dirty skyscraper that's driving the sale? They're both helping, but the model doesn't always pick that out, and I think that's really important. Add to that things like earned media, which we don't feed into our models right now, but must be having an impact. It's really hard as a brand that's already got an established plan to unpick some of those things. So yeah, I'm deeply envious.
Yeah, just a couple of things, really straightforward actually. Something occurred to me as I was just sitting here. On digital, we talk about impressions and views for video activity. We don't really talk about that on TV, so it'd be relatively straightforward to just use the same metric when talking about how many people saw your ad. That's not really, that wouldn't be a big stretch for most agencies and indeed, sellers of inventory themselves. And just to put some names on the context of, younger brands who kind of are embracing marketing in a slightly different way. At Little Dot Studios, we do quite a lot of work with brands across social media and their own platforms. And we devised a methodology to standardise a lot of the activity that those brands are doing and mapped 200 brands in the fashion sector last year. And in the sportswear category, Gymshark came ahead of Adidas, Nike, other massive household names, just as an indicator of how they have got to the 1 billion plus scale that they have in such a short time without really any ad funding at all through influencer marketing and managing micro communities and just doing marketing in a completely different way. I don't know how many conversations they had about whether they should invest 5 million quid on TV, but probably not many.
Yeah, it was interesting, the first point you made there with about the kind of language of research across the different platforms, because we work with kind of brands, agencies and sort of publishers, if you like, but what we've observed recently is that a whole ton of kind of what would be quite hardcore digital businesses are using the language of linear TV to kind of stand up the reach and frequency of their campaigns. So that kind of is happening, which I'm quite pleased to see, because actually where we're from as a Danish business, it went the other way. Weirdly, about 10 years ago, I think the linear TV in the Nordics started talking about CPMs and using the digital language. But it's changing here as digital definitely becomes more of a branding medium than it has ever was before. So that's kind of encouraging, I think.
What are the challenges you're seeing for your clients?
Oh, our pricing mainly.
Apart from that.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's not me. I mean, actually, what you were saying before, Wendy, about like, there's so many things that aren't known, and we'd love to be able to sort of lump in the influenced or earned media and stuff like that. One of the challenges is for brands to know where to start and to know what's truly achievable with, say, the first step into cross-media measurement, because certainly all of what you want isn't achievable in one project, obviously, which I'm sure you know. But the real challenge is where to start, I think. So we have done work with Wendy's team, and you know, those guys started very carefully by just saying, right, we want to look at incremental reach on TV because of the pressure on TV. Let's just buy a couple of kind of comparative digital media on top of the linear TV and see what the reach looks like, and then the clients will go one step further, because actually this is one of the things that's definitely really got good in the last year, or has changed, is the debate around attention has really helped, I think, get people to think about quality on digital video, mainly because it has to be comparable to the linear TV to really have any true comparability in terms of, is that like a TV ad? Is it fair as well?
I think that's a really good observation, and also not just comparable in terms of the quality of the inventory, but also the creative that you put out there. And I think that's probably, in the past we've seen some really good examples of where people are delivering that really high quality creative through the line, but equally some examples of people that are saying, well, it's a programmatic environment, it's cheap inventory, so let's have lower quality activity out there, and that sort of, to me, that undermines the whole process. So you have to have that quality, both the comparability of both the creative that you've got out there and the inventory that you're putting it into. But I think it's interesting, going back to your point around how brands are doing it, to my mind, that relentless test and learn attitude has to exist. You have to try something. If it fails, you have to go back in and try it a different way, because I think we all instinctively know these things, you know, can happen. But actually, it's very easy to give up after the first time you try and find a different way of getting that incremental reach, and then going back and trying it a slightly different way. But I wonder, one of the problems you have is kind of from a universal language perspective, you can't apply the same thing across different industries. So the examples that you're giving of, say, Gymshark, really highly engaged category where people want to buy those products and really want to be part of something different, and part of the kind of the buzz around being part of Gymshark. In the insurance market, sadly, not everyone loves it as much as I do.
I love buying your insurance.
It is, unfortunately, and financial services generally, and many other categories, utilities, we're a low interest category. People have to buy into them for various reasons, but they're not necessarily going to want to be part of an engaged fan base. There are people that do, I'm sure, but so different challenges by industry, I think, probably doesn't help as well when we're as part of that debate in terms of working out what is the right thing to do, and how do you standardise some of that measurement.
It's probably not really, doesn't quite fall under the heading of this panel, but a few, probably say 5+ years ago, we used to get irritated with clients who just give us the TV ad to run on digital. Now, since the pandemic, YouTube viewing is roughly 50% on TV or large screen devices. So yeah, put the TV ad on YouTube and other connected TV apps, because it is the same experience that the consumer's having at the end.
Yeah, we just did a study which said, I think it was 48% of Americans consider watching YouTube as being watching TV.
Yeah.
It's 25% over in the UK at the moment, but it's only going to grow.
Yeah.
And people are watching YouTube on big screens now. They're not just sitting there watching it on their mobile.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
I don't know, my
you can
mobile's
cast
quite
it onto the telly. It's brilliant.
We also talked about, just going back to the first question, about the changes that are actually taking place across the landscape. And a couple of you actually said you weren't that perturbed by it, or you thought it was slightly overblown, right, about what's happening with cookies at the moment. And
yeah, I mean, cookies going away is great, because they were always a sort of quite handy for people flogging programmatic media, and I did that. They were sort of useful, but they didn't really tell you much about the truth of what's going on. And I think the cookies going away, we've seen this with a lot of people on the buy side and the sell side. They've really learned a lot about data quality and what was actually in these data sets we were using, or buyers are certainly questioning if that's a load of And when we had one instance where it was to do with a vegan audience that was being targeted, they said, someone in the UK said, I've got 10 million vegans in this segment in the UK, like brilliant. So we looked it up, how many vegans are there in the UK? There's 1 million. So you have to really think about what's in this data set. And so the cookies going away has made life a bit harder for some vendors, but it advances a quality situation in digital media enormously, because then you have to bring better metrics in, or interrogate the people selling you media in a more intelligent way, really. To say, what is actually the effect going to be from what I'm buying here, not just some numbers that, got thrown around in Cannes,
Is this a case of us now suddenly being able to point at the past and say, yeah, it was all rubbish what we're doing then, the new stuff's going to be better? I remember, Anna, there was a app that I think Oracle enabled you to look at all the segments that it had put you in, and I was both male and female. I was both between 25 and 34 and 35 to 49.
Yeah.
So I was pleased with one of those. And
yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, I think what people have learned is that the segment building is nearly always probabilistic, and that was really just didn't seem to be known 2 years ago by most people buying or using segments, that there was an estimate being made on who was in there, and exactly what you said, you can be both.
Do you have an opinion on that?
We were talking about this before, and I think my perspective was that the whole thing with cookies was that and digital measurement was that it became the thing that we all talked about because it was the thing we could measure most easily. I think that goes back to my point earlier about the speed of delivery of other metrics. Is if you're going to have to wait however many days for data on TV versus being able to get an immediate measurement on digital, it's much easier to get people to listen to that immediate measurement. And the other thing we were talking about was the last click model, in the days when you thought that search drove everything and everyone ploughed all their money into search, took money out of TV. And that's, to my mind, that's a surefire way to optimise your plan into a really suboptimal position, because you start going only with the things that you can get immediate measurement on, and take away the kind of the science of marketing, because it is, to my mind, a blend of science and art, and you need to be driving demand at all parts of the funnel and travelling that through, and not just thinking about the last thing you learned. Everything within the funnel should be playing a role in driving that through. So yeah, am I concerned about the loss of the cookies? Not massively.
Absolutely. And as an advertiser, you probably shouldn't be, actually. So. Anything to add to that?
I don't know, this isn't really about search, but I'm fascinated by it, because the spend on search went up. I think it was 38% as well in the IAB report yesterday. So I'm just like wondering, is that new vendors or new buyers coming in? So is it the Gymshark type businesses that we've got to do search, or are the advertisers still bidding on their own brand terms like crazy? I don't know. But it's just such a big scale up still on search, where I've always believed if you do a good TV campaign, you don't really need to do much search.
I don't know. I guess what my response to that would be is it could be a combination of we're seeing lots of really good brand advertising out there at the moment, and actually I would expect that from our perspective, I would expect that to drive search, and we would be able to invest more money in search, not on our brand terms, but on more generic terms, and actually harvesting that demand is always going to be important to brands. I think if certainly in our category, if we were to believe that we do spend all our money in the brand arena, that people will organically come to us, that would be very naive. And actually, I would expect that, I might be able to invest more, but at a lower cost per acquisition, because my brand stuff is doing so well. But there's definitely a role for search in the plan.
Yeah, I was always driven slightly by selling something against search in the old days, and I just wanted some of that money. But it was the last click thing, which seems to have gone away a bit now, I think, as a debate. And we're talking about a more like attribution modelling, which I think is going to get really interesting again, now that people think differently and away from cookies.
Yeah, and we're focusing a lot on advertising measurement. Obviously, this is a panel devoted to that. But there's other issues. There are other channels. There's own media. There's the world of social, which has invented metrics quicker than they've gained users. And so there is inherent value in being able to talk to your customers where they want to have a conversation with you, however terrible that term is. But it's not entirely clear how to go about measuring the value of those interactions, social engagements. and there's quite a lot of activity from some platforms in trying to influence what that might be. And so that there are ways, and as I mentioned before, we've done some work to try to standardise and understand the business value of those owned platforms and investing in content rather than advertising to drive the same business outcomes that you might do through a larger media investment.
And I'd love to be able to measure that, because I think for me at the moment, being able to attribute any kind of ROI to an engagement score is quite tricky. The value of developing content, we know that we could develop really good content for our customers that would be useful and valuable, but actually being able to demonstrate the worth of that in ROI terms is really difficult. So you end up doing things that are because it's the right reason to do, and it sits there in the plan, but it's always the first thing that's at threat if, you know, the inevitable cost challenge comes in. You've got something that you believe is the right thing to be doing, but because you can't attribute that back anywhere in the measurement framework at the moment, it's the easy place to cut the money from. And I think, you know, that's the bit where, as advertisers and marketers, we have to become much more long-term in our thinking about the value of that.
Perfect. I am going to ask for questions in a minute, so please do. I'd love to. Yeah, we've got a roving mic at the back. I would like your opinion on what you think the most important metric for advertisers is, please.
I mean, I think in the context of this, it's definitely reach initially, because the first thing to uncover, if you want to keep it simple and go on a sort of cross-media measurement journey, am I reaching the right number of relevant people, or the maximum number, because that's where you can sell the most. But then and there's some sub-metrics to that around quality and price, or per reach point, but then, you know, you've got to get to attribution pretty quickly as well, because is that element selling more or not? Mm-hmm. So I've just answered that with about 5 things. So
We'll forgive you on
reach
this
first.
occasion.
On the other end of the funnel, I'm afraid, business outcomes.
Oh, great.
That's
We
it.
actually don't agree.
That's it, pure and simple.
I'm somewhere in the middle, because that's a nice place to be. But I think I absolutely agree on the reach measurement. But for me, it's being more specific about it being attentive reach rather than just efficient reach, because I think that's probably the bit where we need to adjust our thinking. But then from an outcomes perspective, there's also cut-through, I think, is super important still. For me as a marketer, cut-through and salience and engagement are really important.
Mm-hmm. And do you think agencies and advertisers are using these metrics effectively at the moment?
Not quite.
What makes you say that?
I think we could be better, mainly because we haven't had the big discussion around attentive reach. Mm-hmm. So cut-through, absolutely. We talk about that all the time, and the ability to land our message well and have it recalled. But when it comes to that attentive reach point, those are the discussions we still need to have.
What do you think needs to happen to make that happen?
So like I said before, it's a scary conversation because it's a very different way of looking at it. It involves us, you know, taking parts of the plan and really throwing up in the air what we've done previously. So I think it's finding those ways without the data to give ourselves the confidence that it's the right thing to do.
I think there's a few media agencies here. I don't work for them anymore, so I might keep my head down after this. Agencies are under so much pressure, left, right and centre, and there's a myriad of data points and metrics that can be measured, and you guarantee that they'll find the one that shows that the campaign worked, and it works every time. So no, I don't think there is, and there's different reasons for that. Some better than others. So no, I don't really think there's a genuine focus on delivering the right outcomes all the time.
I haven't really got much to add to that. I kind of agree. But, I mean, there is a sort of cabal of pioneering marketers and agency groups that definitely are starting to do this, but it's not widespread yet. It's probably similar to the amount of people wearing masks on the tube now, I'd say, as a percentage.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have questions?
Yeah, I do. Sam Tidmarsh of Media Talent. As something I've been really, really interested in over the course of the last few months, the last year really, is seeing all of these online-born brands moving back to TV for effectiveness. And like you said, Gymshark not spending any money on advertising and then amassing X number of views on TikTok. But does that, is that really driving effectiveness? Why are we all coming back to TV? Is TV the pinnacle of actually how you can drive reach and engagement?
Is it effectiveness that they're going back to TV for? Or is it something else? I guess, it's one of the most effective ways of getting that big reach, isn't it? But actually, you've got to build your brand. And the question I would have is whether you can build a brand entirely online. I think you can in some categories, but in others that is harder. And actually, TV is a tried and tested medium for brand building. So my personal perspective would be that they might be looking for effectiveness, but they also might just be looking for share of voice.
And that's an interesting category. I mean, it's a race to the bottom. There won't be the same number of suppliers in 5 years as there are today. So it's about being top of mind, top three. If you want to raise awareness with a general population, you're going to do that through the largest reach channels, and that still is going to be TV plus. So yeah, I think there's different reasons for different categories and different brands.
Yeah, agree. I mean, the only other stupid thought I had was that maybe they've got big enough that they can afford an expensive and experienced marketeer who would probably come with a TV-first approach anyway.
Gentleman at the back, please.
Is that on? Ian Dowds at UCOM. An observation first on Graham, something Graham said, and then a question for Wendy. Graham, you said it should be very simple to compare an impact on TV to an impression online. It seems to be the biggest problem that measurement is struggling with, both in the UK and across Europe. So it's clearly not as simple as it should be. There's a lot at stake. And the question for Wendy. It frustrates me a little bit that a lot of the conversations are about measurement broadly, and people speak at cross purposes between measuring campaigns and advertising and content and audience, and they are two very different things. As an advertiser, when you are talking about cross-media measurement, are you primarily focusing on the measurement of your ad campaigns?
I am, yes. So I was talking about how we make sure that the campaign is measured as a whole rather than the sum of its parts, so that we're making the right decisions about media investment moving forward. Because I think my biggest worry at the moment is where we try and isolate different things, you get to a point where you end up with a very narrow media mix, and that's not good. It's not going to drive the growth that we need to succeed. So for me, that measurement that the cross-media, we were talking specifically about cross-media measurement and attribution, that is what I was talking about.
I think it's really important to make the distinction, because Origin is primarily about the measuring of advertising campaigns, and yet it gets included in the conversation about measuring all audience,
Yes.
which it isn't there to do, and they are two very different things. And often people are talking at cross purposes about two very different parts of the strategy and media planning process. But it's good to clarify. Thank you.
Phil from GSK.
There's a microphone just coming down.
Phil from GSK. Just to build on that point, and sorry, it's a bit techie question, but do the panel believe that the industry is educated enough on forgetting the metrics, forgetting the methods, the panels, how they collect their data, what data they collect, advertising exposure, content that was exposed to, and I'm kind of looking at Martin because you own a panel, but then you look at Kantar, Comscore, Ozone Project, everyone has a panel. Do we understand enough about those panels, how they're curated, how they're managed, whether they're sufficient? So many things. It's so important, but it just doesn't seem to be part of the conversation.
Definitely, no one is educated on it, really. It's very, because it's complicated as well. I mean, I think most people would understand how the bar panel works, because it's been around a long time, and its concept is simple at a sort of high level, and everyone gets it. But like the online panels, it's so complicated, because online panels have to be way bigger, because there's so many more channels to capture, and therefore you need to be able to subdivide it more. Now there's the concept of virtual panels or virtual IDs, which I've seen, and this isn't going against Comscore, but I think there was a guy from Comscore who's presented their panel definition or methodology for that piece at a couple of conferences, and it's a nightmare to present. It's so complex, because you can't talk about these things in a simple level, because then you miss how it works. But if you go into the detail, it looks awful. So it's very, very difficult for the panel owners to do that. And everyone's got a different approach as well. So I think it's really, there isn't much education because it's very difficult to get it across. I just hope that over time the vendors and the panel owners will do a better job, but also people will understand, be able to go into the deeper level of it as well and understand that it is complicated.
Yeah, and from our perspective, we produce content for some of the leading brands in the world, and it's very hard for us to pick up what we can see as being massively high volumes of viewing on digital channels through panels such as TGI. So it's panels start to fall away in effectiveness as you get towards the longer tail of distributed content versus, it's fine for TV where there's a handful of channels and only a smaller selection of programming that anyone can be viewing at any given point in time versus, the upwards of 500,000 pieces of content that could be available across even just the different video on demand services.
We probably have time for one really quick question, if we can. Lady at the front.
Hi, thank you guys so much for speaking here today. The question I had was, I guess for brands who are interested in experimenting in the metaverse or with the Web3 services, what challenges do you anticipate they'll have with their marketing measurements, or maybe to use your language, what invented metrics might come out of this?
Oh, God.
I might defer that to one of my esteemed panel members. I'm definitely not the person to.
Oh, you talked about test and learn. Come on.
Test and learn. Yeah. Do you know? I think I don't know, because the metaverse to me is something I'm still like many other people. I know there's a few people out there that really know what it means, and then there's quite a lot of us here sort of going, oh, I really do need to know what it means, but don't yet know. I think you're going to have. I don't know. Genuinely, I don't know, but it's something that we've got to explore.
It's somewhere on the hype cycle. Dip your toe in, see what happens, but it's a long, long way from being anything that's going to drive any real value other than a few headlines, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's specifically the metaverse. Web 3.0 is mechanism, I think. It's not opportunity.
Yeah, I haven't got a clue, to be honest with you, what's going to happen there. I think it's going to be really interesting, and put your bullshit radar on. But I mean, if you are going to try it out, then you just do it in a way that somehow can be more or less isolated from everything else. So you can just somehow kind of A/B it in some way or other and see, put a slightly different product in there. I don't know, but don't just throw it in with everything else, because it will just be even more noise.
Thank you.
Fabulous. We are out of time. So thank you so much, Wendy, Graham, Martin. Really appreciate all your thoughts.
Thank you.